You copped a huge amount of flack. After Bush, you were probably the second most unpopular figure for some time locally. And many of us have been watching New Orleans with great interest, thought you couldn't possibly win again. How come you did? You were blamed for a lot of stuff, you know that.
Well, you know, I had challenged a lot of powerful people. And, you know, the United States has a lot of resources. They can topple whole governments. And I think that spin machine started to work on me. And they're very effective at what they do. What they didn't realize is that the citizens of New Orleans understood that even if they didn't agree with me all the time, I was speaking out for them. I was actually trying to help people who needed help. And I never left my post. And I did something really unique, and I don't think they really still figured it out. When I was running, I decided to go talk to the kids. So I went to every school that was open, and I talked to the young people, and that created a buzz in the households, and it softened some of the negativity that was out there. And then when they had to make the ultimate decision about who they wanted to lead us, I really persuaded the citizens that change was not a good thing at this moment, and they went with me.
I'm aware of the story of how you took a really broken down cable media setup and turned it around quite spectacularly. How did you get educated? Your father's a janitor, for God's sake.
My parents really stressed education in a big way, and I kind of gravitated to it. I was a jock, played a little baseball and basketball, but always had a significant thirst for knowledge, and that has served me well. I'm a voracious reader. I always have 4 or 5 different books open.
Good point. What are you reading at the moment?
I'm reading a couple of different books. I'm reading this book by Naomi Klein. It talks about how disasters are used to change and to shift. You know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely.
I'm trying to think of the name.
She's got quite a big following here.
She does?
Yeah.
It's a very interesting book. She talks about how disasters are used to change and shift a lot of public dollars into the private sector. I saw that during Katrina. There is big bucks to be made in disasters. One of the things that I found amazing is that right after Katrina, there were $400 million no-bid contracts that were let. Halliburton, of course, got 2 of them.
Pretty well, yeah.
Yeah, they did 2 of them. But one of the big games was debris removal. And that's all the garbage and those trees that are down. And the contracts were awarded to pay $40 per cubic yard. That's the big boys got that. And they subcontracted down until the poor person at the local level who actually did the work got paid $7 a cubic yard, but everybody up the line got paid and didn't push a broom.
The internal refugees, and there's still quite a lot of them, were shoved into emergency housing, which turned out to be reeking with formaldehyde, I remember. In other words, they would have been better living on the streets than living in the emergency housing.
Terrible situation. As a matter of fact, I have my personal secretary lived in one of these trailers, and she's had respiratory problems since. We tried to get some independent studies done on the actual effect of what this was doing to our citizens, and the federal government did a study, and they did it at the coolest time of the year, and basically proclaimed that it wasn't as bad as we thought. But the formaldehyde really comes out in warm weather during the summertime.
One of the most extraordinary things you've decided to do, and I would have thought given its symbolic potency, its very negative symbolism, was refurbish the Superdome, because that became an image of hell around the world. It was like looking at an anonymous Bosch painting, and yet you've now made it beautiful again.
Yeah, I think we're, with this next round of investments, we will have invested $400 million in the Superdome. It will be almost a brand new state-of-the-art facility.
Is that for the morale of the community, principally? That piece of symbolism?
I think that was the positioning, but the reality was that was the first thing that the state could figure out how to fix. The federal government dollars, unfortunately, one of the things, lesson learned for me, I spent maybe 50 trips going to Washington to lobby for federal dollars. And my biggest mistake was not demanding that the money would flow directly to the city. So every dollar flowed through the state. And that was the first thing they could figure out how to fix. And it worked.
For 70 years, Australia's been trying to learn from natural disasters with royal commissions and inquiries. There's one going on in Victoria as we speak about the last belt of bushfires. And it's hoped that communities and governments and infrastructure, the cops, the army, the ambulances, all learn. What has America learnt from your city's suffering?
What has America learned? I think we learned that we have a long way to go in dealing with these types of disasters. I'm still very concerned about future disasters because the fundamental change that I expected, whether it be federal laws that would be updated, still have not been done. And what America is relying upon now is different and hopefully better management. But the same system that was set up to respond to New Orleans is the same system that we have in place today.
And we were talking off air, I think, about terrorism, a man-made catastrophe as opposed to a so-called natural disaster. And what New Orleans taught about that, even the idea of mass exiting a city in super fast time, the problems that really hasn't been thought through yet, has it?
I think for the world, it really hasn't been thought through. New Orleans has this unique advantage, if you will. We have hurricanes, we get to practice evacuations, we get to move most of our citizens out. We can evacuate our entire city in about 72 hours. But I watched Houston, for example. They had a major storm and they tried to evacuate and it backed up their freeways so badly that they just abandoned that effort. And I just think most major cities around the world are going to struggle if they ever have to deal with a terrorist attack or a natural disaster like this.
I want to open it up now to questions from the audience for 10 minutes or so, but a last point to you. What's next? You can't run for another term. Are you waiting for the phone call from Obama, or will you go back and make lots of money?
I've had my belly full of politics, so most likely I'll be getting back into the private sector. If the president calls and it's an interesting post and it's not necessarily a job, I will listen, but for the most part, these past 4 years have been something that I will never forget. And then when you link that up with being in quarantine in Shanghai, I think I'm overdue for a break.
We're not announcing it to the audience yet, but as you and I know, the doors will be sealed shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, I think there are some roving microphones around.
Yeah.
And there's a gentleman there with his hand up.
Thank you, Nick. Phillip, long-time listener, first-time caller. Mr. Mayor, we're once friends tonight. The Army Corps of Engineers, friend or foe of the past century. Friend or foe in the past, when I was in New Orleans, US Army Corps of Engineers were never always regarded well. So you control the city, but who controls the river? Is it Maritime or the Corps of Engineers?
The Corps of Engineers is definitely in control of the river and our levee protection system. It's a big bureaucracy, and it hadn't performed at a very high level, and we're trusting that it's going to perform at the right level this time. But what tends to happen with the Army Corps of Engineers is they build to the latest standard, and the latest standard that's there is the current storm. So they're building to a Hurricane Katrina standard and not necessarily to a standard above that. And they spend a lot of money. Right now, they're scheduled to spend in the New Orleans area $14 billion to build the 100-year flood protection system that we needed before Katrina happened. They're not even near talking about how they go to protect us effectively from another Category 5 storm that potentially could hit us. So friend or foe, I'm not sure. There's just a big bureaucracy that you have to watch very closely to make sure that they're doing quality work.
While we get the microphone to the next person, we didn't talk about the psychological damage that's been wreaked on a lot of people.
Well, I think that's one lesson that can be shared with the world. New Orleans is still suffering with post-traumatic stress disorder as it relates to Hurricane Katrina. It's manifested itself in a number of different ways. Suicides have tripled since Katrina. Attempted suicides are up dramatically. The number of police arrests as it relates to mental health issues are substantially up. Our young people, and this is where I have the most worry, the young kids that saw the devastation or saw their mothers on the roofs and waiting to be rescued and going to shelters that weren't properly prepared. Our young men are becoming more violent as time goes on. So we have a huge initiative to bring more mental health services. That's something that most communities are going to have to deal with.
A question? Yes,
thank you, Mr.
Madam.
Mayor. Knowing everything that you know now and all the experience you've had since Katrina, if there was one thing that you could have done differently before, during, or after the storm hit that would have had the biggest positive impact on the people of New Orleans, what would that have been if there was one thing you could change?
You know, the one thing that, I worry about and I lose a little sleep about is the call for the mandatory evacuation. It was about a 10-hour window where I could have called for a mandatory evacuation a little earlier. Now, the counter to that is it would have been at night. And the thing about a hurricane is that it draws all the negative, all the bad weather toward it. So the day before, 2 days before the hurricane, it was beautiful weather in New Orleans and people really weren't aware of the threat. But I had a 10-hour window where maybe we could have gotten more people out. And whether they would have heeded that call, I don't think we'll ever know.
A next question? Yes, up the back. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Nagin. Earlier in the year, a member of the Bush White House was at the U.S. Studies Center, and he said to us when I asked him about it that they didn't have a lot to do with the response to Katrina. It wasn't their fault. He said that really the only thing they would have done differently is they would have defied local and state officials and sent in the National Guard. And basically he said it was all to do with the state and local officials. I'm wondering whether I should believe this official who visited the U.S. Studies Center.
Well, I'll be fair with this answer. There was a huge struggle between the president and the governor of the state of Louisiana. And there's a little-known law called Posse Comitatus. And it was established right after the Civil War, basically to protect southern state rights and not have the federal government to come in to be law enforcement. And it's still on the books. So technically, the governor of the state of Louisiana had to invite the federal government in to come and help with law enforcement and help deal with the disaster of Hurricane Katrina. And our current governor was a Democrat, and she was so concerned that if she did that, she would look weak during her re-election, and she did not invite him in. Now, the other side of that is that the federal government could have overridden that, and they could have declared it a catastrophic disaster, and then Secretary Chertoff could have sent the troops in anyway.
Yes, I think down here. Oh, is there? Okay, sorry. It's just implacable gloom out there, but far away.
Mayor Nagin, my question has two parts. The first part is, did Katrina change your opinion of federal versus local power? And the second part is, Lakers or Magic?
The second part, definitely Lakers. Did it change my perception of the federal government? Yes, it did, and I have been advocating for this. I think that there are certain disasters where local governments are going to be overwhelmed, like a Katrina, and I have been advocating for it to be clear in the law that certain criteria would allow the federal government to come in automatically in the case of those events, but there would be a sunset. It would be a 2-week, a month, or whatever, a sunset, where they would come in and do what they need to do, and then local control or local authority would be restored.
We're going to wind it up, but I want to finish with Obama and pick up where you and I left off last night. You found it an overwhelmingly exhilarating moment, and you see it having a huge flow-on benefit to young black men across America.
And women.
Millions in prison.
Yes.
The highest incarceration rate in the world.
Yes.
Will that fundamentally change?
You know, I think it will over time. One of the things that was amazing to me on election day, because I went all around my city, and New Orleans voted overwhelmingly for President Obama. I saw people who voted for the first time, ex-offenders, elderly men who were in their 60s. And now I see a certain pride in the African-American community, not only in New Orleans but around the country, that basically is saying, look, if Obama can aspire and become the President of the United States, maybe I won't get in the drug game. Maybe if I'm thinking about it may be okay for me to be pregnant, maybe I won't do that because I could be the First Lady of the United States. So, and then every night, you see those images of that family and those 4 little beautiful daughters in the White House, and it's just inspiring.
And on that happy note, I think we should thank the Mayor. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.